Well, it looks like Americans are trying to flee the country in droves. A number of wealthy Americans applying for citizenship or residency in foreign countries has skyrocketed over the past 3 years as billionaires and celebrities look to create a plan B for their families, according to Yahoo News. These so-called golden passports allow foreigners to receive citizenship in exchange for investing in the country. The most expensive programs range from $1.1 million in Malta to $9.5 million in Australia, Forbes says.
The recent uptick in American applicants started during the Trump administration and escalated during pandemic lockdowns. Some have said this reflects a deep-rooted fear about the future of American society.
So it's interesting. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Brie.
No, I was going to say that it's interesting that people aren't just leaving the country, but actually seeking out citizenship in other countries. Because the former, I think, is more common, perhaps, among people who don't have $1 million to burn.
Well, what I find interesting about this is where you could get a golden passport are places like Portugal. So Portugal, it's not as expensive. If you buy a home, I believe it's like got to be $500,000. You could get a golden passport. If you invest, you could actually even buy a more rundown home for less, as long as you promise to fix it up. You could get that golden passport. Or if you start a business in Portugal, so it's a little bit more flexible there. But places that are allowing these sort of golden passports where these Americans are fleeing, like Portugal, like Australia, like Malta, they had really heavy lockdowns, much more significant lockdowns than we had here in the United States. So it makes me wonder if the people that are fleeing for these countries, were they more pro-lockdown? They felt like the U.S. didn't do enough and they wanted heavy-handed lockdowns, because that's where they were. I mean, Australia was very significant with their lockdown. So I think that's kind of an interesting aspect to it.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I worry, and you two might disagree with / beat me up on this, but don't we want the U.S. to be a place that is attractive for the investments of very wealthy people? And what does it say about our policies with respect to taxes and regulation if very productive members of our society want to spend their dollars elsewhere, think those are more worthwhile investments? Won't that eventually leave us in a concerning place?
Well, Robby, I'm not sure we can attribute this people departing, the people fleeing, to the tax structure of the United States of America when the uptick occurred under Donald Trump, who gave trillions away to the rich in the course of his
maybe they think we'll be more confiscatory in the future.
All right. Well, it seems to me that what is happening here is people being perhaps, seeking out COVID policy that seems to offer more support in terms of people being paid to stay home, people being paid sending tests to their house, people having opportunities to choose to regulate their own health in a way that is not they're not able to do in America. Countries that have universal health care, countries that have access to abortion rights. I mean, there are a lot of things that are changing rapidly in the United States of America that many people are not happy with. And those with means are finding a way out.
So I will say I can speak sort of from personal experience on this, because right before the pandemic hit, I actually bought myself a one-way ticket to Portugal, and I was actually going to do this.
Really?
I was one of the Americans fleeing the country, not because I have $1 million to spend in Portugal by any means. I couldn't even buy a house there really, but I was going to go and freelance and set up business, and then you could eventually gain citizenship through time in Portugal and move around Europe once you get your EU citizenship. But my reasoning was sort of similar to what Briahna's talking about. I really looked at Europe and the way they're set up, and I'm thinking, okay, when you buy a home, there's really no property tax on your actual home that you're living in. So as you get older and you're on a fixed income, you're not stressing about what am I, because when property taxes keep getting reevaluated in this country, and then elderly people that are retired and on fixed incomes have to pay more and more and more, they get forced out of their homes. That doesn't happen in Europe. I liked that the food costs were low. I liked that there was health insurance for everybody. I just was looking at my future and thinking, when I'm old, where would I rather live? Would I rather live in the United States where there's like no support structure whatsoever and you get forced out of your home all the time and with no rent controls or property tax controls? Or would I rather live in Europe where I actually would be cared for as an older person and live in a nice society where I don't have to worry? The only thing I'd have to worry about is like the price of milk maybe going up a little bit here and there. So
yeah, my family actually did something similar. When we were kids, my parents moved overseas in part because they couldn't afford a quality education for us here. They became teachers and we went to schools where they taught for free, but also childcare was cheaper. They were able to get more for their buck in terms of housing. It was a real lifestyle choice. Now that's a kind of neo-colonialism for Americans to be able to go overseas to less affluent countries. We moved to Kenya for 6 years to take advantage of the strength of the dollar as a relative metric. But it certainly isn't a new phenomenon that people have realized that the idea that America is the greatest country in the world, in some respects, but in some respects, there are a lot of other places that offer things that are increasingly imperiled in the United States. And I think as you see, other decisions potentially coming down the pike, if Roe v. Wade isn't the only privacy case to be overturned by the Supreme Court, if gay marriage, if interracial marriage, if a lot of these other privacy rights, right to contraception, start coming up on the chopping block, a lot of other places are going to look attractive to Americans who've gotten used to certain cultural norms over the last 50 or 60 years.
That one's going to be tough, though, with Roe v. Wade, because I don't know where they could go. I don't know where we could go. Europe and South America still have pretty, they're not as, they're more religious and still run on a lot of religion.
They protect the right to choose up to 15 weeks in most of Europe.
Well, that's true, right? To 15 weeks, but I mean, to get it beyond that, right? I guess that would be, yeah, well.
I think I'm probably staying in the States. I don't like the COVID policies I don't like the COVID policies here either, but
well, that's
you're
why
right that they're way worse everywhere else.
Yeah.
Well,
Robbie's the last American. He's going to be standing there with his flag.
I know, and I've never thought of myself as like a rah-rah patriotism kind of person, but we're glad we didn't lose you to Portugal, Kim, although it would have been nice to vacation and visit you there.
You know what? What would it matter to you guys? You guys don't even know where I am right now. I could be in Portugal right now for all you know. So. Okay, I'd rather be
I know exactly where you are. All right, well, we will have more Rising right after this. Stay with us.